Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Uday Bhaskar. This being the last episode of Security Scan, it is perhaps appropriate, but let me add, purely coincidental, that we review the current turmoil in Kashmir and deliberate over the security and strategic implications of this issue. The elimination of the Hizbul Mujahideen commander Sabzar Ahmad Bhatt in end May has seen a wave of protests in some constituencies in the valley, as also an increase in the violations across the line of control. Despite a call for a shutdown and a boycott by separatist leaders, more than 1,300 local youth from the Srinagar and Baramulla areas were seen applying for recruitment in the Indian Army. Clearly, the mood in the valley is wide spectrum, and a binary reduction would perhaps be invalid. And as the political stalemate continues, various options are being considered, perhaps quietly, in Delhi and Srinagar. The role of the army in a complex internal security environment has also come into sharp focus post the major Gogoi incident, and remarks attributed to the Army Chief General Bipin Rawat have evoked a wide response and in some cases critical comments. This is a hot summer in more ways than one, and to illuminate this entire issue in an objective and informed manner, allow me to welcome and introduce our guests. Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain, who is a former GOC, 15 Corps, Ms. Ruwa Shah of the Indo-Asian News Service, and Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, a security analyst who has been dealing with Kashmir for a very long time. Let me turn to you first, General Hasnain. How would you describe the current situation in the valley? You served there, you've known it for many years. Is it, shall we say, part of a pattern that we have seen in the past? Or is there something new that we should be reflecting over?
So, I think classically you have to remember that this conflict or proxy conflict has been on for the last 28 years. It's been dynamic in its content. Ups and downs have been witnessed. There have been no clear winners. But obviously, by the time around about 2014 or so, we had the upper hand completely. However, there's been a dilution since then, especially after the killing of Burhan Wani in 2016. And the paralysis that the valley went through for almost a period of about 5 or 6 months. The winter again was bad in the sense, climatically bad, although no major activity was witnessed. But now in the campaigning season of 2017, what you're really seeing today is a series of events. I think it starts, the more important ones for the election itself, the unfortunate killing of Lieutenant Omar Fayaz, which signifies the kind of presence of local terrorists in South Kashmir. Thereafter, in the election itself, you had this very unfortunate incident of the jeep where you had the alleged human shield being used, which has sent up all kinds of emotions and sentiments. But at the same time, we also witnessed interference in military operations by flash mobs, which actually got temperatures of the army higher. And because of that, there has been a response from the army which has been a little stronger than normal, which is leading to all kinds of deliberations about which direction is the army actually taking. And lastly, the important thing to remember is that the infiltration season has opened up. The army has had 10 successes in a matter of 2 days on the line of control, which is a very, very positive development. But all said and done, it is a little abnormal situation from the trend that we had noticed from 2011 onwards. But it's not something which is so worrisome at the same time. I think with the due efforts on the security side by the military, jointly with the police forces, and some outreach to the people of Kashmir, I think this situation can very well be restored.
Since you spoke about the people of Kashmir, Ms. Shah, can I request you to share your thoughts, because you belong to the region and you have been reporting on it. So the last month, we spoke about this a month ago also. How would you characterize or describe the current sentiment as far as the valley is concerned?
See, in my opinion, the sentiment in Kashmir, like the locals have always been wanting what what they want right now. The alienation, the difference is that they feel more alienated right now because of the provocative statements that the ministers, that the people at the helm of affairs are making. The provocation is more, the alienation is, it's increasing day by day. And when you talk about the locals, the sentiments, I don't think this generation is going to negotiate ever with India, because
so when you say this generation, you're talking about the current youth of Kashmir.
I'm talking about the youth, because we have seen more than what people like our elders have seen. They were in a relationship with India where they could have talked, but right now, the way the state has behaved with this generation, I don't think there's going to be any negotiating point, because as we see since 2016 post Burhan Wani's killing, more and more people have joined militancy. Only over 100 people have joined since 2016. That gives you a sense that the locals, why is a 15-year-old boy picking up a gun, and he has been killed after 2 months only after his joining militancy. You see, you need to consider that. You can only talk about these things when you actually feel for the people, which the state has obviously, unfortunately,
so what
not
you
ever
are
felt.
hinting at is a rather bleak, shall we say, kind of sentiment, definitely in terms of the youth that you're talking about. And last time I remember, Rua, you spoke about the symbolism of the girl students picking up stones and what that means in terms of the socio-cultural indicators. But I'll come back to you. Marshal Kak, you have been a representative of various initiatives by the citizens, led by both Mr. Yashwant Sinha and a recent group that had Mr. Manishankar Iyer. So, picking up from what Rua said, about the current youth being alienated and an older generation having a sense that they could speak to Delhi, how would you characterize the current political dynamic in the valley and Delhi?
See, the political dynamic is an extremely complex one. I think I will take your very thoughtful words of looking at this from strategic and comprehensive security angle, and that's important. What she said, current generation, previous generation. Kashmir is a problematic arising from 3 different elements. One is Kashmiri's sense of betrayal by the central government across political leadership from 1952 onwards, when Delhi Agreement was signed, and consistent efforts to dilute Article 370, which gave them special status within the Indian Union. That's the Kashmiri perspective. We have Pakistan Army across the line of control and the international border, whose raison d'etre is creation of a threat from India, and Kashmir being the jugular vein, quote unquote, used by Musharraf famously. There is also a fear in Pakistan that waters into Pakistan which quench Pakistan's thirst originated in Kashmir. There is also the central government, again their perspective, that Kashmir is nation building in progress. It must integrate with the Indian Union in a fullest sense of the term, and that's what's current impulse in the leadership. But I want to stress the political point that the current leadership represents 31% of the vote share of India in 2014. And when we look at the 69%, which is represented today by the opposition, which is trying to look at the political dimension of Kashmir, because we can't, as a union, as a power to be, as a great power in the making, I don't think it's fair to let Kashmir remain on the simmer when it has been for 30 years. Atta talked about 2014. Sir, I would like to add 2013. It was the killing of, the hanging of our Kashmiri. It has stirred the pot in terms of impulse. The situation was completely under control from 2005, from 2002 right until 2008, that 6-year period. Vajpayee's initiatives, all these elements that I mentioned there were brought into a stable equilibrium. Pakistan came on board. India, central government was more inclined to be flexible. Kashmiris came in. other than Mr. Ali Shah Gilani, all the separatists joined that process. Everyone knows that 4-point process. What I am trying to say, Uday, with your permission, I take only 20 seconds more. This is a, I'm not as hopeless as Ruba is, but Ruba represents the 4th generation. I was just asking her, her grandfather is 88. In 1947 to 52, her great-grandfather was a mature young man. So you can look at it how a kind of ineptitude in handling
But
Kashmir.
why are you not as, shall we say, hopeless or helpless the way in which she is?
I'm glad you asked me this. You see, we have interacted with the youth. As you said, it's not a binary.
When you say we, it is the Yashwant Sinha
All
led
groups.
group.
I have been on my own.
Okay.
Multiple trips.
So what is the sense you pick up from there?
The sense is there is hope and
There is hope.
hopelessness.
I'm going to come back to you on the hope for a moment.
The
I just
people
want to
who
pick up
talk
these
about
people.
hopelessness say India has killed our hope and therefore our counter mechanism is stone.
No, we must all be optimistic. So I'm glad you're talking
Yeah,
about hope.
no,
But
I am
want
very
to come back to
optimistic
you on the
provided
issue.
India moves forward. The central government takes initiative.
I'll revisit that, but I want to ask you something else which has been causing a lot of concern, and this is really about what I had described as the post-Gogoi incident and the perception about the army. Now let me put my head on the block first and say that the remarks attributed to General Rawat, the army chief, that the citizens should be afraid of the army, even if he was misquoted, misrepresented. This has become the dominant perception. I have tried in vain to try and interpret the army chief without his permission to say that he was definitely not suggesting that the Indian citizen has to be afraid of the army. But there is definitely, as I said, it has led to a spate of editorial comments in print, social media, etc. So could you help us to understand, because this is very critical, the locus and the way in which the army is seen in Kashmir?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I think there are lots and lots of people who are waiting for answers to this. And immediately after stating his, General Rawat proceeded to Myanmar. So he's still there, I think. And so a response has not been forthcoming from his side either. So let me try and interpret it from his angle also. You have to understand that this conflict is very hybrid in nature, and that any solution to it or any stabilization effort has to be always all of government. And in that, it is generally led by the army. When the army creates a situation of stability, that's where the political process, that's where the furtherance continues with it. Now, what we have seen, as what the Air Marshal also said, we have seen a dilution of the security situation since 2013, alienation which has been high. And despite the army's a very controlled balance of hard and soft power, which was adopted ever since 1997, after the elections of 1996, we have been able to stabilize the situation very largely. All the sentiments may be whatever they are, but the army was always been seen to be correct and balanced. What we suddenly see is a targeting of the army. And the army being the core center of this entire doctrine, this entire focus, I think from the other side, from across the line of control also, the masters of the separatists have ensured that the army has been targeted, particularly from the psychological angle. What General Rawat was essentially alluding to, and I fault him for one thing only, that perhaps there was no need to communicate this at all. What you were only talking about is a slight change in the doctrine. That is, the balance of hard and soft power, which was tilting towards soft power till 2013-14, has now seen an upliftment of the balance on the hard power side. And that is necessary because of the situation, the way it is emanating. The army for the first time had a negative ratio as far as its own kills was concerned. Almost for every terrorist, for every casualty, only 0.8 terrorists killed, which has been just improved in the last 3-4 days. Now, with this kind of a situation, no army chief is going to feel comfortable. My only thing which I fault the army chief is in the manner in which it was stated, and I would say it was really unnecessary to go to the media to talk about this. If you are going to the media, you have to be very circumspect about the words that you use.
The choice of word.
The choice of words. If I can just sum it up, what he essentially meant was that there's a slight change in our doctrine, in our focus. We will come back to it again, and we are not going after people. It's not the same words which he used, helter skelter, if you remember the last time. It is just a question of a slight change of doctrine. We are approaching it from a slightly different angle. Our people friendliness may not be to that level which the people may expect from us, from the army. That is what
I think, you know, we really need to reset this button and say that in a democracy like India, the citizen respects the army for its professionalism and its apolitical nature. This has been our history for 70 years. And I think, you know, that's where we should leave it. Respect and, as I said, the regard for the army that any democracy would sort of exude. But Ruwa, you want to say?
I think
I want to ask you something else about this Azadi issue, but go ahead.
First, I'll come to what Ata Hassan said. Ki, you know, he's saying that the statement should have been, like the words should have been softer, or what he meant was not this or whatever. But I think there has been no change in the policy of the state since the conflict started. If we talk about the 1990s situation, the Kunan Pushpura gang rape, where the entire village was raped by I think 45 RR, it was a sin that was given, where your soldiers were given impunity by the state. Even now, nobody is talking about it. People are asking, like, for proof whether it happened or not. How can you even say that?
Don't have a rule of law.
No, but I think this gets us into a different, you know, area.
No,
I think we just passed.
But it is the same. They have been saying, India has been saying that the message is that we're only dealing with violence, and they have been dealing with violence since the start of conflict till now. But it is for the first time the army has admitted it publicly that this is the method we're going to deal with.
We'll take this on board for now. But Ruwa, I just want to ask you one question very quickly before I come to Kapil, which is that when you speak about the younger generation and their sentiment, there is a political reality about which Kapil has given us the broad history. Now, as far as the choices are concerned, for the composite state of J&K going back to 47, it was accession to one or the other. There was no in between. You know, there was no Azadi in the sense that some people try to interpret. I'm just asking you a question many people in India ask. Does the younger generation in Kashmir acknowledge that political reality, or is there some kind of, shall we say,
I think the younger generation
imaginary construct that you have?
As far as I know, most of the people in Kashmir, most of the youth in Kashmir only acknowledges the fact that we are not going to stay with India. Whether be it Pakistan, be it a separate state, there is a debate. We don't know.
But they are not going back to the reality.
But we are not going to
okay. I mean,
stay
that's
with
good
India
that you're saying.
Because the state has done so much in Kashmir. The atrocities have reached to such a level where there is only hatred for India. Let me say it very
Kapil,
clearly.
this is where perhaps you might want
not
to
the Indian people,
bridge
let
this
me make it
particular
clear, it's
sense
just
of
the Indian
perception
state.
that the choice that you don't want to stay with India, but there is no in between. If you go back to how August 1947, October 48 had unspooled. But currently, you know, you spoke about the 31% of the 2014 election. But the reality in a parliamentary democracy is that the BJP is the lead party. Prime Minister Modi has an emphatic numbers, shall we say, majority in the House. Now, the fact that you have a BJP and a PDP alliance in Jammu and Kashmir, would this be a cause for hope, the hope that you mentioned, especially since the Home Minister recently made a statement saying that we are seized of what is happening and give us some time, we are moving towards the equivalent of some kind of a solution?
3 or 4 quick points. Let me start with the last point you made. Unfortunately, the PDP-BJP alliance, which was a master stroke of a very great statesman of Jammu and Kashmir, Mufti Saeed, he wanted to make it Jammu and Kashmir, but over the last 3 years, it's become Jammu versus Kashmir. That is a reality. Apart from the realities my esteemed colleagues have pointed out. So I'm afraid the government and governance was on the agenda of alliance, and people were looking at how this agenda of alliance will move forward. In fact, in that agenda of alliance not moving forward, not only is Mehbooba Mufti losing the ground, political ground in Kashmir, which must worry the center, because she is a buffer between what she talked about, the anger of the youth, and the needs for the center to ensure there is law and order and security. My point about what you talked about the youth, yes, they moved from grievance, victimhood to alienation, but now I agree entirely with Dhruva, it is hatred. Now, how do you, in a democracy, how do you address hatred? A robust democracy like India must reach out to the youth, to the political forces. What is it that angers you and what can we do? I don't think any Kashmiri is not wise enough to realize that secession is not possible, that they cannot go to Pakistan, that India will remain there. So if that be the case, the sentiment of Azadi creates many sentiments. I mean, if you ask there will be 10 different meanings of what Azadi means. If you ask a young boy or girl in Kashmir, they said, get rid of the security forces, I am Azad. I mean, this is what I am trying to say. So it's not that this is not rocket science. All it needs, unfortunately, all political parties have brought this situation to this grim reality. The Congress, the NDA, but NDA won and UPA won, moved forward. If we can just revisit that imaginatively, creatively, and if
so
we can
maybe
look
there
at
is hope in what the
dialogue.
Home Minister said, but Atta, I want to bring you in on what Rua was saying about the army particularly. I thought you might want to, place that.
I was actually surprised that someone educated, knowing Kashmir well, will say that the army's methodology of functioning an army in Kashmir has been static from 1989 till 2017. I'm sorry. I don't think you have studied the army's methodology at all. Right from 1989, I admit, the initial part, the conflict initiation part, was all about hard power. And if hard power had not been used at that time, Kashmir would not have been a part of India today. But thereafter, 1996, the excellent decision to go for elections, 1997, with the humanization of conflict, coming of Sadbhavana, the do's and don'ts of the Supreme Court, the 10 commandments of the Army Chief, the new standard operating procedures of Northern Command. I don't think you are aware of any of this. All these things brought in the humanization aspect of the conflict in 1997. And progressively, and perhaps I may just tell you, in my own time as 2010, 11, 12 as the Corps Commander, I brought in the Hart's Doctrine. Was it not different to what was happening in 1989 and 1990? To say that the army has been on a one-track policy right through from 1989 to 2017 is absolutely
second.
There has not been a single case where the army has been given the punishment for what the crimes they have done.
For example,
may I sort of intervene once? I don't normally exercise this option as the anchor.
Fake encounters.
Rua, 1 second. I just want to say one thing.
Everything. The army has never been given the punishment.
Allow me, Rua. This is the first time we've increased our DB level in the show. I just want to say that on this particular issue, your sense that the army has not carried out its own investigations and awarded punishment is not factually true, because I know personally, I've sat in on some of these, punishments have been awarded. But I'm sorry, this is the last episode of Security Scan and we are discussing a very important issue, and I apologize to my panelists, because the Kashmir issue remains complex and contested, and since early 1990, when the Pandits had to flee, it has defied an equitable and a consensual long-term solution. As our discussion has suggested, the use of the security forces can only create conditions that may be conducive to the socio-political process, but it cannot replace it. The unlikely BJP-PDP alliance at the state level had led to considerable hope, and its resilience is now on test. To seeking an accommodation of this issue within the framework of the Indian Constitution, even while pursuing acceptable interpretations, if you will, about territoriality, which in turn has bedeviled the India-Pakistan relationship over Kashmir. India will soon celebrate its 70th anniversary of independence in August this year, and Kashmir symbolizes both the idea of an India that is to be cherished and one which is currently under severe challenge. India's founding fathers rejected the two-nation theory that prioritized religion and embarked on a nation-building effort that had no precedent at the time, given the diversity and scale that is India. Many of the aspirational objectives for the nascent and free India were sagaciously and painstakingly incorporated into the Constitution by Dr. Ambedkar. The abiding challenge for India is to retain the fidelity to the spirit and letter of the Constitution, a commitment that Prime Minister Modi had made in earnest manner when he assumed office in May 2014. India's comprehensive security, or what Chanakya had referred to as Yogakshema, is a sacred compact between the state and the citizen, and the latter include all shades of the Kashmiri demography. Security can be imposed, but it will remain transient and could turn sullen. To remain sustainable, equitable peace has to evolve consensually among the principal stakeholders, and that remains the holy grail in relation to Kashmir. On that note, allow me to thank my guests, General Hasnain, Ms. Shah, and Marshal Kak. And thank you for watching Security Scan over the last year. This is the final goodbye from me, Uday Bhaskar, and the whole team at Rajya Sabha TV.